Spider-Man PS4 is probably the best Spider-Man game that I could have asked for on current-gen hardware. The game was a perfect mix of comic book charm and movie realism, which I think set a really great precedent for the game straight away from the get-go. From the moment I loaded up the game to the end of the credits, I enjoyed the fuck out of this game, and that's not even an over-exaggeration. I've waited 2 years for this. Playing the game for the first time was pretty surreal, especially considering it's been so long since we had a proper good Spider-Man game, and even then none of the previous games have been anywhere near the sheer quality of Spider-Man PS4. I know a lot of people were hesitant to compare Spider-Man to the Batman Arkham series, and I totally understand that. Arkham has been a big part of the video game industry, and has had many hardcore fans since Arkham Asylum came out in 2009, but I suppose it's all about personal preference. I actually prefer Spider-Man to Batman Arkham, but it's probably because Spider-Man has always been one of my favourite characters of all time. Anyway, I personally think I was right about this game, because I actually made a video discussing how great it's going to be, and it seems like a lot of what I said was true in the case of the actual game. Except for the fact that they didn't include the Sam Raimi suits in the game. They missed out big time. I'm just gonna say that. Those suits would have been fucking amazing in this game, let's be honest. Anyway, today is a review of sorts for Spider-Man PS4. So the gameplay of Spider-Man PS4 is easily the best part of the game. I sat there just swinging around the city for a lot of my time playing this game. I wasn't even doing anything, just no missions, not searching for collectibles, but just swinging about because the mechanics in this game are just so good. If you remember the beloved momentum-based swinging from Spider-Man 2, this is like that, but only so much more advanced and realistic. I can't really put my finger on why it feels so good to swing around. Maybe it's the animations, maybe it's the sound effects or the scale of the city, or maybe it's a mixture of all of the elements, but damn, does it feel amazing, as many people have said.
Make you feel like Spider-Man? I wanted Marvel's Spider-Man on PS4 to make me feel like Spider-Man. Coupled with gameplay that made me feel like Spider-Man, feel like Spider-Man.
Right. I get it, the web slinging's good and it makes you feel like Spider-Man. You don't have to say it after every fucking sentence. Swinging can also be used in conjunction with the combat, and it makes everything flow so much better. Obviously, the goal for Insomniac was to make Spider-Man feel as agile as possible when playing the game, so making all of the many movement types flow into each other seamlessly, such as running, swinging, web zipping, fighting, and parkour, was a really good idea. In previous Spider-Man games, getting into combat sometimes slowed down the gameplay exponentially. However, in Spider-Man PS4, you can completely seamlessly go from fighting a group of enemies to swinging around them, and this helps gameplay flow so much better, which goes a long way, especially in a Spider-Man game. The combat itself is really good. I can definitely see that it took a lot of inspiration from the Arkham series combat. However, it feels a lot more superhero-y, if that makes any sense at all. Fair enough, Batman is a superhero, but he doesn't really have any powers, meaning that combat in the Arkham games is a lot slower and more grounded than the combat in Spider-Man PS4. Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I do really like how they even managed to capture the feeling of Spider-Man in the combat. Previous Spider-Man games have just had a few punching and kicking animations, whereas Spider-Man PS4 boasts a lot of impressive combat animations that were built from the ground up by a team of talented developers. The combat is as smooth as butter, and is actually quite challenging when you're faced with large groups of enemies. Another feature that took a lot of inspiration from the Arkham games is the stealth. You use high up perches as vantage points, use stealth finishes to take out enemies silently, and you can stealth take down someone from above. You can use gadgets to distract enemies, you get my point. They're very similar, but all in all, it's a good stealth system. It works, and it's fun when you have patience. I've always wanted a Spider-Man game that has a proper stealth mechanics, because Spidey isn't always smacking people's heads in a fight. He can be stealthy when the need arises, so it's great to see that Insomniac went the extra mile and put stealth in this game. Spider-Man's movement is the most important part of any Spider-Man game, without a doubt. What would he be without his trademark web slinging? Certainly not as cool as we remembered him from our childhoods, hence why it was so crucial that Insomniac not only developed an impeccable web slinging system, but also an open world that is fun to swing around in, and my god did they succeed. New York is looking more beautiful than ever in this game, especially at the various scripted nighttime sections. The thing is, the side content in the open world really isn't even that great. A lot of it consists of collectibles, which to be fair always have a cool reward or some form of backstory, but on the whole the side content isn't amazing. Yeah, it's pretty fun and reminiscent of side content from older Spider-Man games, but what makes everything you do in the game feel amazing is the scale of the city and how generally beautiful it looks looks as you're swinging past buildings and web zipping to ledges. Honestly, I could swing around in this game forever, it's just so fun. They even included the Avengers Tower in the game, which is a nice addition, linking the game even more with other comic book characters. Something I noticed is that the open world is dynamic. If something happens in the story, the open world will change. Near the beginning of the game, New York is how you'd expect it to be, usually in a Spider-Man story, but towards the end of the game where the city reaches a point, there are escaped convicts and deadly viruses on the loose, then there's way less cars in the street, but lots more enemies. There's even a point where you can't even swing across the city without being shot at. The open world in this game really is impressive, from a cosmetic standpoint and a sandbox standpoint. It will never get boring swinging around New York as Spider-Man, especially in an open world as quality as this. Spider-Man PS4 really is a true Spidey story. It follows Peter 8 years after becoming Spider-Man, meaning he's at the peak of his abilities and is very experienced at saving New York on a regular basis. He lives in a terrible apartment, works for Dr. Octavius, works with Aunt May at Feast, homeless shelter, has to manage his social life, and is also Spider-Man on top of everything. The key to a great Spider-Man story is facing Peter with all of these responsibilities and hindrances, but still having him come out on top even when all of the odds are against him. The person playing needs to feel as hopeless as Spider-Man, so highlighting how Peter manages his busy life is a good way to allow that empathy, and it's just done so well in this game. You really feel bad for Peter when things don't go his way, because you know that fundamentally as a character he's only trying to do the right thing, even if it means sacrificing something that he holds dear. The story starts off pretty normally. You're just fighting crime as Spider-Man usually does, but the story really does develop quite quickly until the fate of New York is practically in Spidey's hands. Something I really like about this game is that it isn't all about fighting and swinging. It actually has a lot of character development and storytelling through the use of puzzles and detective work. There are some sections of the game where you don't even play as Spider-Man, you play as MJ or Miles, and even though these sections definitely weren't as good as when you're playing as Spidey from a gameplay standpoint, they did help flesh out the characters more. I think the version of MJ in this game is actually one of my favourites in any Spider-Man story, and this was helped along by the exposition and character development present in the sections where you play as her. The exact same can be said for Miles. I didn't even think he was going to be a big part of this game, but he ended up being one of my favourite characters. In fact, this version of Spider-Man is one of my favourites of all time. He's a great mixture of the comic book web-slinger, cracking jokes and being overall pretty immature, but with the serious undertones of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man all the way from Parker's shit life to the soundtrack and his relationship with certain characters. The whole game almost feels like a wild goose chase with a mixture of exploring, fighting, puzzle solving and detective work to uncover the story. But this isn't a bad thing. I noticed that each mission furthered the story or characters exponentially. There was no mission that I played that I thought didn't have to be in the game, which shows that the writing was done well, at least I think it was. The story of Spider-Man PS4 boasts many powerful moments, and I cannot wait to see what they're going to top with this sequel, because let's be honest, there's gonna be a sequel. Spidey has a lot of things you can customize in the game, from his appearance to the various gadgets that you can use to immobilize enemies in combat or stealth. The game's crafting economy is based solely on the tokens you get from completing different side activities. Say you unlock a suit and want to craft it, you check the requirements and then complete the corresponding side content that rewards you with the tokens you need to craft it. The same goes for gadgets and gadget upgrades. Yeah, it's a bit of a strange system, and I'd much rather have it that you unlock each gadget through the story, meaning that the introduction of each piece of equipment can change and influence puzzles and enemy types and subsequent missions. I would say the same for suits, but instead each suit is unlocked by completing some form of challenge instead of grinding for tokens so you can craft them. I'd rather add meaning and challenge to getting each suit, but that's just me. Leveling is pretty standard. You get XP for completing missions, and when you level up you get skill points. The skill trees are alright, but a lot of the abilities you don't really notice after purchasing them, unlike other games where the skill trees actually help you out a lot. Now that's not to say that the skills are all bad, because there are definitely some good ones, but I would like to see more abilities that weren't so throwaway. If we compare the skill tree in this game to, say, the Arkham Knight skill tree, there's absolutely no contest at all. Arkham's is way more in depth. Well, I suppose Spider-Man didn't do everything better than Arkham. There certainly are things that Arkham did much better in this game, and I'd say that customization as a whole is definitely one of them. On the whole, I'd say this game is the best superhero game I've ever played, and it's up there with the best games I've played of all time, period. I knew this game was going to be amazing when I first saw it, and the story, characters, and environment still somehow exceeded my expectations. A game like this only comes around once every so often. However, it seems as if Sony are releasing amazing exclusive after amazing exclusive, so maybe it's more often than we might think. Anyway, it was a pleasure playing this game, and I'm glad to say that I was right about Spider-Man PS4.